Wisp Sports Radio, the voice of women in sport.
Kia ora, I'm Zoe George and welcome to the September episode of Fair Play, a podcast covering women in sport from athletes and results to current affairs and issues. This podcast is made in association with Wisp Sports, Locker Room and RNZ. If you're into podcasts as much as we are, check out RNZ for politics, crime and lifestyle podcasts. And if you want your sports injection, check out Wisp Sports and at Locker Room for everything to do with women in sport. This month, we discuss diversity, or lack of it, in sport. General Manager of Women's Elite Programme at the National Rugby League, Tiffany Slater, discusses the importance of the Women's Warriors playing on New Zealand soil, and Liz Dawson gives us a glimpse into being on the board for the Women's ICC Cricket World Cup 2021. And of course, it's not fair play without an update from the toilets at the Basin Reserve. This month's co-host has more than 20 years of experience working as a consultant across both arts and sports. She's managed big projects that affect sport, from helping Sport New Zealand with their disability strategy to New Zealand Rugby. She's currently the chair of Shift, an organisation that seeks to improve the wellbeing of young women in New Zealand through accessibility to sport and recreation. Shift is partnering with Women in Sport Aotearoa for the Women and Girls in Sports Summit coming to Wellington in October, covering the big issues related to us from diversity in sport to leadership. Welcome, Robin Coburn.
Kia ora, Zoe.
It's lovely to have you on the podcast.
Well, it's very exciting to be here. We've got plenty of interesting things to talk about.
We certainly do. So what is Shift?
So we're a charitable trust that focuses on the wellbeing of young women. We are really exploring ways of reducing barriers to participating and empowering young women by inspiring them to be young leaders. We co-design, prototype, measure impact and then spread the word.
Oh, that sounds fabulous. And you're partnering with Women in Sport Aotearoa for this upcoming summit, is that right?
That's correct. WISPA have a real focus around value and visibility and leadership, and we as Shift have a real strength around participation, and so it felt like it was a really good opportunity to collaborate. We've got a much wider brief in terms of active recreation, whereas WISPA has a much more focus on sport. So once again, a great opportunity to connect.
And the summit is coming up here in Wellington, the best city in New Zealand, if we have to be slightly biased. What is going to be involved with this summit?
It's on Monday the 7th of October. We've got about 300 people attending, so an incredibly great response. And we are going to be having a couple of fabulous keynote speakers. I'll talk about them in a minute. 3 strands that we're focusing on: leadership, participation and value and visibility. And we're really looking to explore some innovative things that are happening both within sport and in other parts of life to develop a bit of an action plan going forward.
Why do we actually need a summit completely dedicated to women and girls in sport?
We still have huge disadvantage in terms of high performance coaching, 70% male, 30% female, leadership and management, 60% male, 40% female. Girls and women participate in active recreation and sport at lower levels than boys. Media representation of women in sport is biased or absent. And in essence, it is not fair play, Zoe.
It's very true. Yes, there's something like, if we're talking about media, something like 10% of coverage of our sports coverage is dedicated to women in sport. And even then, when we talk about female athletes, it's predominantly about their family or their coach rather than their athletic achievements.
One of the best New Zealand publications that I used to find in libraries was memorable moments in sport in New Zealand. There were more horses than women.
Are you serious?
Absolutely.
Oh my goodness. Were there at least some women riding those horses? Come on.
No, the horses were just there in and of themselves. No riders were in sight.
Oh my goodness. So as part of this summit as well, diversity is a really big talking point, and there's going to be a really large panel with the likes of Beatrice Whamawina talking about accessibility and diversity for Pacifica, Maori, those with disabilities as well. Sport is for everyone. It's actually a basic human right.
It is a basic human right. And I think we sometimes forget that when we are looking at the fabulous representatives of sport we have on the world stage, that actually there are many things that preclude people from participating in sport, and there are a whole lot of things like poverty, gender, disability that then come together to make it an impossibility for many in our communities.
That's so true. That poverty aspect is something that we often don't talk about here in sport. It costs money to participate in sport from grassroots up. I mean, if you can't afford to pay your fees to play, then you're not going to play, are you?
Absolutely not. And I think the other really interesting thing from a gender point of view is that if you ask girls and boys from the same socio-economic class, girls will say there are no resources to play sport and boys won't.
I read somewhere, Robin, the other day that something like 73% of New Zealand women and girls play sport and recreation. Is that true?
There is high participation, but I think you've got to be really aware of what that actually looks like in practice. So if you are a girl at school, you are required to participate in physical education. So that counts.
Right.
When you start to get to an age where physical education is no longer compulsory, or your parents don't have as much influence, participation levels drop off significantly. And those juncture points are at late intermediate and then again through secondary school. So we have two significant drop-off points, and that's where Shift has actually been trying to work out how do you engage young women at those points so that they have a sense of their own physical enjoyment, they have ownership of their bodies, and they are enjoying the pleasures that we know are part of participating in physical activity and sport.
So what are some of the ways that we can engage with those young girls and women?
So we need to ask them what they want to do and not tell them what is possible. We need to be working with them in ways that build their sense of belonging. That's a really important piece. So Shift always works to create whanaungatanga, so that sense of belonging amongst a group, a sense of self-acceptance, a real commitment to mental health and wellbeing, because those are all things that start to chip away at young women and their confidence to participate. So working on a multi-pronged approach is really important. And not necessarily competitive sport, because actually that's not attractive to many young women.
That's interesting. Well, I mean, I think back to when I was 10 and 11 and I had quite the competitive streak, but I might be the exception to the rule.
And I think that's one of the interesting things, that we have a sports system in New Zealand that is run by people who have been successful products of that sports system. So we don't have a sports system that includes people who have not participated in sport or who have felt isolated from sport. We're more likely to find some of those people working in other avenues. And actually Shift has discovered that the best way of reaching young women is to work with people who have a youth development approach or who are focusing on the wider wellbeing issues, rather than people who are necessarily fabulous athletes or people who are highly engaged in active recreation.
And ability is a good thing, you know, to have. You've got to have elite athletes eventually, but to have everyone participate, we're going to have a variety of abilities, and sometimes some of those abilities aren't being catered for.
That's right. And I think it's been very interesting, the change in junior sport in New Zealand, the de-emphasising of representative teams at the young age is a way of saying actually it's healthier, both from a sport perspective and also from a human growth and development perspective, for people to have breadth. It's more important that they play a musical instrument, participate in a sport, and are involved in some kind of outdoor recreation than it is to play 5 games of the same code every week.
But having that diversity is very important. Something that I'm finding that we don't talk a lot about, actually both in music and in sport, as both of us have an interest in that area, is disability and accessibility to those areas. When we talk about disability, we talk about disabilities that you can see. Sophie Pascoe is one of our most celebrated Paralympians. Rachel Meyer, who I've done lots of stories on, she's a paraclimber. They have visible disabilities, but not everyone has those.
There's a stunning fact, and that is that about 10% of children have an impairment of some kind. Only 1% have a physical impairment. 1% has a sensory impairment, vision or hearing. So that means that the remainder of those children have an invisible impairment. And those invisible impairments might be things like impaired speaking, learning and developmental delays, capacity to comprehend. So all of these things are likely to impact on their capacity to engage in things that others might engage in.
How do we cater for people with invisible impairments?
I think we need to be thinking about the things that are barriers to their participation. And what we know is that if you have difficulty concentrating, or you have some kind of chronic pain, or you are struggling with cognitive dysfunction, actually the thing that you need is time. You need time to listen, you need time to understand, and you need time to put that into practice. And we don't organise our sports activities so that, in particular, young kids have the time to do all of the things that they need, particularly if they have an invisible impairment. We also need to be mindful that for many people with invisible impairments, they have a range of other things that are likely to get in the way. So they don't necessarily have the financial resources to have people support them in activities that they might want to do. They are more likely to experience poor mental health, so there are some compounding issues. But what we need to do is just think, actually, participate in active recreation and sport is a fundamental human right. How do we make things accessible and affordable and fun for this group of people?
Absolutely. There are some big questions there. How do we do those things?
The work we did for Sport New Zealand, in conjunction with the disability sector, identified 5 key areas. And the first is actually leadership. We need Sport New Zealand and other lead agencies to be saying, first of all, that sport is a basic human right, and that just because you've got an invisible impairment doesn't mean that you should not have access to that human right. And we also need people to be talking to the organisations that fund and support people with disabilities to say, actually, just funding aspects of their life is one thing, but participate in recreation and sport is another critical component. Put some resources in there too. So that's the leadership aspect.
And what else? So you said there's 5 aspects. So you've got leadership.
Well, we need more enabling attitudes. So we've now become much more accepting of the fact that people with physical impairments go to the Paralympics. They are rock stars in their own right. We love them. They've got fantastic stories of courage and competition. And, we blitz people on the world stage. But they're our public rock stars. And we've got a whole lot of people for whom actually, if you are not able to communicate effectively, or you're slow to learn or understand, we still have negative attitudes. If you're a mental health consumer, you are more likely to be evicted from a public swimming pool, for example, because of not socially acceptable behaviour. Whereas if you have a physical impairment, there's likely to be a special slot, a ramp and a disability changing rooms. We'll get onto the toilets later. But so we need more enabling attitudes that say, actually, we just need to think smarter about how we might make these things possible for people. We've got people who just don't understand enough about conditions like ADHD, Asperger's, brain injury, fetal alcohol syndrome. All of these things are features that start to impact on people's behaviour. So we need to train the people in the sector. Now that means paid and volunteer people. And I think we need to be saying to families who have kids with a disability, actually, it's okay for you to find a way for enabling your kids to have fun and play and participate.
Absolutely, because it's a basic human right.
It's a basic human right.
It's a basic human right.
Yeah.
And they have just as much right to participate as you or I.
Yeah, exactly.
Today's co-host is Robin Coburn. We'll be coming back to her shortly, but history was made in Auckland this week when the Women's Warriors took to the field for the first time on New Zealand soil, and although the score was against the Dragons wasn't in their favour, it was a chance to put the game front and centre. General Manager of Women's Elite Program at the NRL is Tiffany Slater. Locker room Suzanne McFadden chatted to her about the importance of this week's game.
Why is it so important to have a New Zealand team in this competition?
Well, the National Rugby League has always been about New Zealand and Australia, and so when we were going through the initial RFP process for licences, one of the big things that we looked at, this was last year, was geographic location and the talent pool. Where are the players? And New Zealand has such a strong playing base and also such a strong potential playing base, and so being a part-time semi-professional competition at the moment, the location is really important so that the players know how they can balance the rest of their lives. So knowing that there's a playing base, knowing that there's a strong culture and a strong club here that has such a big presence in New Zealand, it was a great opportunity for us as a game.
Cool. And how important is today to have a New Zealand women's team playing at home in the NRLW?
Yeah, it's huge. It's history in the making. It's the first standalone NRLW game ever. And it's also an opportunity for the Warriors, who travelled every week last year, to have their own families and their own friends and all the supporters of Women's Rugby League in New Zealand to see them in action and to come out and celebrate just the women today. And so whilst the doubleheaders are great and they're excellent whilst we're building the NRLW, today is so important in starting a new era of the NRLW and giving the women an opportunity to stand on their own 2 feet.
When do you expect this competition to expand? I mean, obviously it's the next step is to include more teams. Would that be next season?
Yeah, so we're working through that at the moment, what the next few years look like. And what we've been able to do this year and last year is really adapt and adjust as we're going, but everybody now is calling for what is the future, which is great because everyone's excited. So we're working through that at the moment, exactly what that looks like. There's a few options, a few different ways you can do it, but really, really importantly is we've always involved the players in the decision making with the NRLW and just generally in Women's Elite Rugby League. And the very strong voice that's come from the players is that they want to be known for the quality of the football that they're playing. And so while we're building the talent pool and while we're developing those pathways and waiting for the next gen to come through effectively, it's probably going to be quite slow, the growth. And that's intentional because we want the football itself to remain at that top quality.
So are you already seeing a change in the women's game, from grassroots up since you've started the competition?
Yes. Probably faster than I was expecting, to be honest. So year on year we had about 40% churn within the 4 teams, which in one sense, sometimes people get worried about that, but actually in this instance it's a great story because it means the players who've been around for quite a while, they now have to up their game because there's people on their heels there waiting to come through. So that shows us that the pathways that are there are working. We've got more to do, but the pathways are working and there are people coming through. And it really is just by putting on something as a national or international competition, it allows young girls of any age to say, actually, that's what I want to do and aim for it. And so then they might join the game. And that's, I guess, the difference that we've seen even in 18 months.
That's NRL's Tiffany Slater chatting with Locker Room Suzanne McFadden. And our co-host today is Robin Coburn. It's been really interesting talking about leadership, talking about accessibility to sports, and you yourself have been a leader in many ways, both in arts and sport. I just want to say, coming from someone who is both into arts and sport, I see where the appeal is, but what was the appeal for you?
I had opportunities because people believed in me and invited me to step forward into leadership roles. So from quite a young age, I suppose I had some level of self-confidence, but people made room for me and they then stood beside me and supported me. And as a young 25-year-old, I thought nothing more than just being bold and stepping forward.
Be bold, step forward. That's good advice to all those maybe possibly wanting to be in leadership roles within sport.
Exactly.
And you've had plenty, but women are still a little bit underrepresented around the boardroom, aren't they?
It's interesting. I've been doing some work with the New Zealand Olympic Committee now for about 12 years around women in governance. And I have to say all credit to the NZOC for thinking forward into the space around gender equity and board governance. And that work started to track the number of women on boards, and we used to publish a report card of organisations that were meeting what was then the IOC target. More recently, Sport New Zealand took over that responsibility, actually as they should, and they set a target of 40% of women to men on boards, and have been working quite steadily, and we've now hit that target, but we seem to be stuck. And even though Sport New Zealand put in some pretty proactive processes, there is now a clear understanding we have more than enough women. We've got the supply side completely covered, but it is the boards who are not yet ready to change and accept diversity as being of value to them.
Why is that?
I think that for some of them, their constitutional design has meant that being on the national board has been the reward for many years' service, the old style blazerati, where you slowly worked your way up through the system. Sometimes also the constitution has been built around electing people from a provincial or regional level onto the board. And once again, if you're not on a board at that provincial level, you're not going to get onto the national board. So more contemporary constitutions have a balance of appointments and elections, and allow also for co-option to ensure that there is diversity or the breadth of skills that you might need. Some boards need more encouragement in that area, and the Sport New Zealand quota system is really suggesting to some boards that they might need to hasten that process.
I mean, we've talked a little bit about quotas, and it's been an ongoing discussion around quotas and women on boards in the past. But maybe do we need to give them more of an incentive? Be like, listen, if you don't have 40% of women on your boards by this time, then we're going to pull your funding?
Well, that's what Sport NZ have said. Actually, I think it was probably the minister that made that promise, and Sport NZ said yes. And the reason being that Sport NZ are a significant investor in sport in New Zealand. So by saying we have some expectations here, and if you don't, we won't fund you, that is a pretty strong incentive.
That is a huge incentive. That is a massive incentive. So what are some of the ways that we might be able to actually get more women in these positions, in these leadership positions? What about things like blind CVs, for example?
Well, interestingly, Sport NZ is starting to do that for their own staff, but there's plenty of evidence to suggest that we choose people who look like us. And in fact, in the music example, they started to do blind auditions for musicians in orchestras, and the number of women went up. So same situation here. Actually, let's take gender out of the equation and choose the right people for the job. There are a number of other things that need to happen. One of the things that we've got is a problem. I've talked about the Constitution, but if you've got a board that doesn't have a maximum retirement age or a maximum tenure, you get a whole lot of people clogging the boards up. So there needs to be good rotation at the board level. We've talked about co-option and advisory, but some boards are using things like internships as a way of bringing people in without voting rights, but giving them an opportunity to practice their board preparedness. having independent appointments and nominations panels, having gender-balanced selection teams for shortlists and interviews, and making sure that your recruitment and selection process is structured in a way that you use language that is going to either be gender neutral or at least talk to both men and women candidates. All of those things are really critical. And lastly, there's plenty of evidence that says that men review a job description, and if there are 4 out of 10 attributes on that job description that they think they can do, they think, yes, I'll apply. Women need at least 8 of the 10 attributes. And if they don't have 8 of the 10, they think, oh, they don't have the skills and they won't apply.
Interesting. So we need to back ourselves.
Absolutely, absolutely. And sometimes that will mean going and actually inviting women to put an application in.
Wow. Very interesting stuff. Let's continue on that board area. We continue our series of talking with interesting people in the lead up to the ICC Women's Cricket World Cup 2021 being held here in New Zealand. Cricket has engaged in the process over the past few years to identify the issues regarding girls and women in cricket, and the Beeman report was a stark reveal of how dire things had become, which I'm not too sure if you were you part of the Beeman report?
No, I wasn't, but I was very interested in its results because it predated the Rugby report, so that was very interesting from my perspective.
Yes, and well, you had a bit to do with the Respect and Responsibility panel with the Rugby, didn't you?
Yes,
so
yes.
So the Beeman report for me was really interesting. They talked to me about my involvement in cricket and a whole bunch of other women's involvement in cricket, so I felt very privileged to be part of that. But it found that New Zealand cricket had been neglecting women, and my response was, really? No, seriously. But it really did reveal that that they needed to focus on it. And since then, New Zealand cricket has worked on a series of initiatives to change the culture around girls and women in cricket. Governance, player contracts, focus on the women's game, marketing, communications have all reflected this. And some of those drivers is New Zealand Cricket Board member and now Cricket World Cup board member Liz Dawson. She's got more than 30 years in the governance and management space, both here in New Zealand and across the ditch. She's been involved with the New Zealand Olympic Committee, St Kilda Football Club in Melbourne, the Hurricanes, and has served on boards of racing and betting organisations, the Wellington Regional Stadium Trust, and was a panel member of the New Zealand Rugby and Respect and Responsibility Review. I started by asking her, how is the bid and resulting hosting of the 2021 World Cup a part of the wider strategy around girls and women in cricket?
It is a very important part of that feeds into the strategy around women and girls cricket. So New Zealand Cricket was awarded the hosting rights in 2014, and at that stage we, as an organisation, didn't actually even have to put a formal bid in as one would if one was doing the, bidding for the Commonwealth Games or the Olympics or any of those other larger international events. And the work that New Zealand Cricket's been doing on as a result of the 2016 Beeman report into women and girls in cricket in New Zealand, this particular event is a very important milestone, as it turns out, for the work that's been done around that.
How do you see that you'll use this opportunity as a stretch target to actually drive New Zealand cricket to be more equitable with respect to girls and women?
The first point that I would make is that New Zealand Cricket as an organisation and our family of cricket, our members, are very clear in their minds that the place of women and girls in cricket is the same as the place of men and boys in cricket. So as far as Cricket World Cup in 2021 it creates a milestone to say, well, here we are. We now have a fully professional women's team, and they have their treatment, if you like, the terms and conditions that they operate under is exactly the same as the men. The World Cup itself, the women will be staying in the same hotels, they'll be flying the same business class, so all of those things, they will be treated the same as the men were in 2015. So it is one of those moments, if you like, where I'm, very proud of our organisation to be leading the change that is occurring in women's sport.
And interesting that you've used that term family when it comes to cricket, the cricket family, because that's what it is. It's a family and community, but I've heard so often cricket be referred to as a fraternity.
Gosh, well, I haven't. So that's kind of interesting. Yeah. So I guess in operating within the sport, as a board of an organisation that is running an event, we very much see that the people who are going to be involved in helping us deliver the event and helping the ICC in delivering a world-class event are part of the family who will be doing that. And, we very much encourage and welcome their involvement, be they participants, volunteers, the umpires, the grounds people, whoever it is that are involved in helping us deliver that event. They are part of the wider cricket family.
Liz Dawson is our guest on Fair Play, talking about the ICC Women's Cricket World Cup 2021. What are your plans to leverage the event for the benefit of girls and women, players, coaches, managers, governors and spectators?
So as far as New Zealand Cricket, the organisation is concerned, the leverage of the event will be in using the legacy for participation, interest in the game, families' involvement, and showing that there is opportunity for girls and women to play the game or to be involved in the game at any level that they want to be involved in any way they want to be involved in. So that's going to be a very important part of the work that will be done to leverage the event in that particular way.
Let's talk a little bit about commercialisation of women's sport and securing commercial sponsorship. What are your thoughts about how best to sell women's sport as an opportunity for commercial sponsors?
As far as Cricket World Cup is concerned, that's the ICC that do that. It is the international event which is owned, if you like, by them. It's their event, and the local organising company, which I am the chair of, that is not part of our responsibilities. So I think it's important for the listeners to be clear about that. But as far as the general commercialisation of women's sport is concerned, it's a little bit like any other sport, whether it's played by males or females or, played by both genders, is you have to start somewhere. And in creating an opportunity for people to be involved and creating an opportunity for people to want to be involved, to want to be part of it, to want to see it, to want to view it, that's a very important aspect as far as the commercialisation of sport is concerned. If it's going to be a professional sport which has an international audience, then there is a much greater capacity to provide a commercialisation opportunity for sponsors or for fans or for viewers overseas to be involved. If it's an amateur sport, then it's a very different set of circumstances.
Yeah, well, it's kind of interesting. There's been a whole lot of discussion around how women's sport's almost like an entrepreneurial startup and that we should be investing in these startups. Would you agree with that?
Well, yes, I do to a certain extent, because if we have a look at top men's sports that are commercial or fully professional, they're invested in right throughout the whole hierarchy of the sport. So, for example, with cricket, we invest in under-19s, we invest at a domestic level, we invest at a development level, and all of that is paid for by the money that is generated at the top level by, for example, the Black Caps and the international men's game. So you actually don't get top international male players if you don't invest at grassroots right through the development and the academies and the schools and the A squads and the under-19 squads, etc., it just stands to reason. So why should it be any different for the females? If you want to create top international sport for females, it's the same thing. You have to invest in the development of the game to bring those players through. It's very simple. It's just it's a talent identification model, a high-performance model that is used in high-performance sport.
That was ICC Women's Cricket World Cup 2021 board member chair Liz Dawson. We're joined by Robin Coburn, who is the chair of SHIFT, who's partnering with Women in Sport Aotearoa to deliver the Women and Girls Sports Summit happening in Wellington on October the 7th. Some really interesting conversation points. I know that you and Liz worked together on that Respect and Responsibility panel for New Zealand Rugby, which would have been fascinating stuff. And it was very important work. But for you, what was the most important thing that she talked about?
I was really interested in the fact that she talked about women's sport as a startup, and that we need to be thinking about it from the commercialisation from that perspective. Recently, I've been talking with someone who says, actually, when you're thinking about leading a startup, there are two things to consider. One is taking more risks, and what does that look like? And the other is ensuring solvency. And thinking about women's cricket in particular, when the men's and the women's cricket amalgamated, the women had all the money in the branches. They were very good at running girls and women's cricket on a shoestring locally, highly solvent, probably not that risky, I would say, whereas the men's cricket had some money in a national context, but were not so worried about it. Let's apply that to the current situation in New Zealand and the challenge that the increasingly professionalised women's sports codes have around commercialisation. I think that there are three things here that we need to think about. One is we need to think about brand new ways of working. So something that is new approaches and is not just men's sport with a pink skin on it. We need to think about ways in which we can do something incredibly innovative. So create something brand new. And both of these things are the antithesis of sport, which is rule-bound, traditional, and takes a really long time to change. So we're going to have to actually push forward into uncharted territory.
I think we can do that.
I think so too.
Maybe that's something we might be able to do at this sports summit that's coming up. Yeah, you're right about not putting, just slapping on women into the men's game, because they are different things and they come with different opportunities and risks as well. It's a very interesting time, I think, to be pushing for women in sport and girls in sport. Anyway, we actually have to wrap up shortly, but before we leave, we can't leave without talking about my favourite subject. It's an update from the toilets at the Basin Reserve. Last month, we heard how the plans are introducing more accessibility and gender-neutral toilets, and the Wellington City Council's disability panel were advised about the inclusions and they were thrilled. This month, the council says the work on the toilets has not yet started, but the structural work on the museum stand is now in full swing. And while I've been doing a bit of research on toilets, I stumbled across a research by the Royal Society of Public Health, and I really hope they're going to come on Fair Play next month. And they have this research called, this is what it is, quote, Taking the Piss. Seriously, that's the name of it. And in the research, it says the lack of public toilets disproportionately affect women, people with ill health, those with disability, the elderly, outdoor workers and the homeless. Lack of facilities act as a, quote, loo leash, deterring as many as 1 in 5 from venturing out of their homes as often as they would like to. And this rises to over 2 in 5, 43% among those with medical conditions who require frequent toilet use. 56% of the public restrict fluid intake due to concern over lack of toilet facilities. YouGov's UK survey in 2017 found that 59% of women reported that they regularly queue for a toilet compared to 11% of men, and a fair ratio of toilet provision would be at least 2 to 1 in favour of women. The recommendation from the British Toilet Association for at least as many female cubicles as there were cubicles and urinals in male toilets. While at the Basin, it's really interesting, Robin, because this is one of my favourite subjects. I've become quite the expert on the toilets. The steps are being made to close the gap. Men still have more accessibility to toilets. In total, there are 8 dedicated female stalls and 5 dedicated male stalls, and there's also going to be 5 stalls that are available to both men and women, plus 3 gender-neutral accessibility toilets. But there's also additional male urinals. So they're not kind of counting urinals as toilets, even though they are.
I find that incredibly bizarre. I think we somehow need a new metric here, which is receptacles for.
Yes, receptacles. Toileting receptacles. How about that? And see, we've been talking about basic human rights, right, and accessibility to sport. Well, accessibility to toilets is a basic human right too.
Can I go back and talk about disability with respect to toilets? I know that there have been a really strong campaign around these toilets from a physical disability perspective, but carrying on my theme around invisible disabilities, I'd just like to point out that there are many people with a range of different sensory conditions for whom toileting is a real challenge. First of all, there are certain sights that they find alarming. The sound of hand dryers can be terrifying, or the sound of flushing water if you have got hypersensitivity in terms of hearing. The smells, toilet smell, but the smells associated with cleaning products, for example, can be overwhelming. You may need space that provides a parent or a caregiver some room, and the concept of queuing can be very stressful. And you've already talked about your timed queue at the Basin being 30 minutes, which you can imagine if you have someone who is on the autism spectrum, that may be 30 minutes too long. Yeah. The one final takeaway from this, you can't always tell about the type of disability someone has by looking, so avoid making assumptions.
That is good advice. Thank you so much, Robin Coburn. We will bring you another update on the toilets at the Basin Reserve next month. It's an ongoing theme here at Fair Play. And that's it for September of Fair Play. Thank you so much to Tiffany Slater, Suzanne McFadden, Liz Dawson and our wonderful Robin Coburn. I will see you on October the 7th at, I think it's Te Papa, isn't it?
Te Papa, yes.
Oh, yes.
Looking forward to it.
Nice. It's a great venue. We're going to have some really fantastic, engaging conversations regarding accessibility, diversity and leadership, and I look forward to engaging more with you and those there.
Conversations from the world of women's sports. This is Wisp Sports Radio.
You can join the conversation at RNZ, at Locker Room and at Wisp Sports. I'm Zoe George. Don't forget to play hard, but play fair.